Yeah, so good evening, everybody. So we are starting today an open course taught by our visiting professor, Gordana Pesakovic. I'm not sure if I pronounced it correct. Right. So Gordana has rich global teaching and research experience. She has been teaching in the USA for more than 20 years and was awarded twice the Best Professor Award. In addition to teaching in the USA, she has been visiting professor in China, Taiwan, Thailand, Serbia, Argentina, Chile, Kyrgyzstan, Mexico, France, and Czech Republic. So now we are going to add Russia, I guess, to this glorious list. She's organized special study abroad program with her students and visited, it is a very long list of countries. She holds a PhD in economics from University of Belgrade. So, Gordana, welcome.
Thank you, everyone. How many of you are not taking this course officially? Okay. For all of you who are not taking this course officially, which there is always a chance you can start taking it officially, I would like you to actually sign your names and emails and everything that it says here, so then at the end of the course, you can then get a certificate. Okay. So, how many of you have visited any foreign country? Okay, good. Since I saw a lot of hands, I would like you to think about one thing that shocked you the most culturally, that was different than from your own home country. What was that? Who's going to be the bravest first? What, you want to start? So, did you see any other foreign country? Did you travel abroad? Cyprus, okay. So what was so different in Cyprus than
in Cyprus? Food was different from Russia. They have some kind of traditional lunch and dinner, and they serve many different meals, and traditionally they serve many different meals because many years they don't have many food, and they wanted to share with visitors what they have.
Very good, thank you. Who else? Well,
Uh, when I was in Thailand, it was shocked for me that people can stop and see around you. But we Russian people, every day we do something, and we do this to be the best one. And every day we absolutely sure that it is not our purpose, and I don't know how to say. Like торопимся, бежим. So that's all.
thank you. Anybody else would like to share? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's shocking, but it was really surprising. In Japan, there is this culture of silence, and loneliness. So you are in the street, but everybody is lonely. You go to the restaurant in the evening. Half of people in the restaurant are sitting alone and eating alone in the restaurant in the evening, right? And you go to, for example, to one of them onsen bathhouses. People come there and they sit in silence next to each other for like hours, right? So there is this, I don't know, culture of silence, I would call it.
Anybody else? Well, I like. Yes, go ahead.
Hello to everyone. Actually, I was born in Kazakhstan, and I would like to say a little about its cultural differences. Firstly, it's how people treat you when they meet you for the first time. They speak to you like they know you for a very long time, and somewhere in the middle of conversation, you may find out that they say, "Oh, I'm living next somewhere near. So let's go and have some tea. So it's very usual for them. And that actually was the first thing that surprised me here in Russia, because I thought for the first time that all people here are quite cold, and they are not happy, or they're not pleased talking to you. After living for several years, it changed, but my thoughts changed about it.
Thank you. Спасибо. I want to share with you, because you mentioned some of those countries, I want to share with you my personal experience. I was teaching one course, and actually it was international finance. And I have students coming from all over the world, of course, including Americans, because that's where I teach. And I had one student, and he was Chinese, but he was coming from Taiwan. And I asked him, what do you do? Because they were all adults. They were like graduate students and taking their doctoral courses. And then I asked him, so what do you do? And he said, I have my own company. I said, great, and how many people do you employ? And he said, I had 50 girls and 10 guys. And the moment he said I had 50 girls, one of my students from New York jumped. And she said, how dare you? And then he looked at me and he said, Dr. Pesakovic, what did I say? And I said, well, you said girls. And he said, yeah, but they are girls. He said, you know what? Just to explain you. Usually when we start learning English, let's say, as a foreign language, if we start learning at a very early age, we really learn about boys and girls. We don't use the terms that are gender, females and males. Okay, somehow I was able to calm down my student from New York, and then somebody asked him, how much are you paying girls versus the guys? And he said, of course, 30% less. And again, she definitely jumped. She wanted to take him to court because that was discrimination. And I basically told him, you know what? Sometimes what is allowed in one country may not be a custom in another country. So that's always nice. Since you mentioned Thailand, and I was teaching in Thailand, I have many students from Thailand, and I really, really love Thai culture, especially the way they treat teachers, because that's one very rare country that really, really treat teachers very well. And they even have their own, they have a holiday that is for teachers, where all the students will come, sing the songs for them. So since I had a lot of students from Thailand, I asked them when that day came, I said, come on guys, get out and just sing for me, And that was really very, very nice cultural exposure to my students from United States. Since Andrew was in Japan, very often when Americans are traveling on business or for any sort of purpose, but for business in particular, they go to Japan and they want to strike a deal, to have a business, to have a contract very, very fast. And as Andrew said, when you ask them a question, then they pause. And then you have to wait for their answer. Usually in United States, when somebody doesn't respond to you immediately, you think that, they don't like it, they're going to leave the meeting, or, you have to reduce the price. And there is also, which is not the case, simply Japanese need time to think. And there is also, with Japan, there is also another little story, since you mentioned that they were all sitting alone for dinners. In Japan, people usually work all day. I mean, they work forever. And then very often they stay very late at night. And since having a machina, having a car in Japan doesn't only involve that you have money to buy a car. You also have to have money to buy a parking space. And since that is really very costly, some of them basically stay very late and they miss that last metro or train that they have to go home. And they stay in something, I don't know if you've ever seen that, capsules. You stay there. So how was it? Okay, you didn't move at all. You just slept all night. Yeah.
Right, so it's like a prenatal experience for me. I was back to my childhood and even before I was born.
Okay, and the capsule is literally a capsule. It's very, very tiny. I mean, especially for tall people, it's very tiny. And then you have to enter inside, but you have inside everything that you need, even in TV. So, the reason why I started in this way is like really just to maybe ignite your interest for international business, because this course is really going to be one of those that I'm sure that you have a lot of those, multidimensional and multidisciplinary course. So we will be talking about economics, we'll be talking about politics, we'll be talking, as you can see, a lot about different cultures. We'll be talking about ethics, and actually tonight we will be talking about ethics and ethics in business. And I hope that you are going to enjoy this, let's say, exposure to the world in those 7-8 weeks. So now, okay, I guess I will, no, this way or that way. So here, does international business affect you? Or let me, yes, you want to say something? But you can start. Volunteering is always good.
Of course, international business do not affect me directly, but I think if I consume products from international companies, as well, very simply Coca-Cola, for example, it means I'm also involved in this international business as a consumer, and that's why like Coca-Cola is in Russia, for example, because it has its consumers.
Since you said it doesn't affect you, you have that little thing called smartphone, and where is it coming from?
I don't know.
Well, if you dig, and I'm sure that everybody nowadays have those smartphones, and no matter what the name of that smartphone is, some people like that's Apple, iPhone, some people like maybe Samsung, some people like something else. But where do you think that almost all of those cell phones, I mean those smartphones are made? Almost all of them, no matter who is going to show up on that brand name. China, exactly. So, and despite the fact that you think that international trade doesn't affect you, everything that you wear tonight is most likely, okay, let's not go everything. Most of the things that you wear tonight is not made in Russia. So, like it, don't like it, know it, not know it, it's actually really affecting every single person. Not to mention, how do we have any sanctions? Do we have any tariffs? Is it free to import? Is it free to export? Not to mention if you're planning to go to all those different countries. I actually happen to have a student who was coming from Argentina at 2001, and he was in United States, and he was spending that week in United States. And at the beginning of the week, he was able to buy, let's say, $1,000. At the end, for his currency, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, he was actually able to buy only 550 same dollars for the same amount of his money. And the reason being because there was a big crisis in Argentina in 2001. So the currency of that country, which we'll be also talking about the importance of exchange rates and how exchange rates can really change your life. When you think about traveling abroad, you're thinking this is how much it's going to cost you. Guess what? Most of the time, all those companies that you are going with, or even if you're going on your own, will tell you somewhere, as Americans would like to say in fine print, this price can change based on the exchange rate changes. Okay? So international business is really, really, really all over. And any questions that you have? Anything that you would like to share? Not yet, maybe. Okay. So, this is pretty much what I'm planning tonight to cover. So, what is international business? What has an interest? Who has an interest in international business? What forms? What is the globalization debate? What is the relation between international business and ethics? Okay, let's jump first to this number 4. By the way, you know number 4 in China? Anybody speaks Chinese? You study Chinese. And okay, what about number 4? Do you know how they say number 4? Okay, you. My volunteer. Okay. You see?
I do not know, but I know that in Asian countries it is similar to death or something like that, and they even write it different way than we are.
Yes, very good, excellent point. Now think about this. There was a company starting in San Francisco, airline company, and they started the business, and then airline company, airplane, samolot, and then they gave the number, that free number that you call. It's 800-444-444. How successful they were? Not really successful at all. And that's really doing your business, doing your research well before you start. Very often in China, I was in Beijing, very often in China you don't have the 4th floor. For example, in Thailand, I think maybe in your culture as well, number 13, is it a lucky number or not that lucky number? Not that lucky number. So in Thailand, guess what? They don't have 13th floor. They have 14 and 14A. They don't have 13th floor. So all those little things, you think they're little, but they can really make a huge difference in your business. So now I want a few other volunteers other than, what's your name? Denise. Okay. Other than Denise, I want a few other volunteers to tell me what are your thoughts about globalization. You are all familiar with the term what globalization is, or at least we hear about globalization a lot. So what are your thoughts? Is it a good thing, a bad thing, anything that comes to your mind?
As for me, I believe that it is a bad thing on one view, because you haven't got national culture, and you haven't got some specific things, and you don't have any identity, so it is bad for us.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any voice in favor? Yes.
I think it's globalization is touch everyone, because for me, I studied at university 10 years ago, and I studied international business in faculty of my university, and now I work in a financial industry. I trade stock markets in USA, in Russia, and all other countries, stocks, bonds, currencies, and I think it's for everyone. Globalization, I think it's a good idea for
Thank you for coming to this presentation and for this class and to SAS. Hopefully you'll stay. Anybody else? Okay, well, yeah, go ahead.
It can be bad for national culture, but I think globalization helps to make the level of condition of living of the countries which are involved in globalization becomes better.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. It will be interesting to see what some people in some other countries are saying about all those points that all of you have raised. Now, international business. What is your name? Our trader. Not traitor, but trader. Stanislav. Okay. Nice to meet you, Stanislav. Okay, so when the company is thinking about going internationally, why do you think that companies are going internationally? What's the purpose of to go international? Why not stay at home? Be happy, deal with your own culture, know your own customers. Why will companies think about going somewhere else? Far away, Japan, Thailand, US. They will get money. Okay, so how can they get money?
More consumers.
Oh, absolutely right. I mean, that's number one reason when the companies are thinking they want to expand their market. For example, somebody mentioned Coca-Cola. We have Coca-Cola market in United States seems to be reaching some kind of saturation because of probably you're following the research and that cola products have a lot of sugar, so they may not necessarily be that healthy for you. And so the Coca-Cola had to come up with some alternative ways and products that are not necessarily related to cola drinks in order to increase their sales, but their sales across the world are rising. So, okay, so we want to increase the sales. We want to get more customers. What else? Why do you think China is now really expanding globally? China is very much involved in Central Asia, very much involved in Africa, for that matter, very much involved in Europe and South America. Why do you think Chinese are at all those places? Sorry? You think that the labor costs in those countries are lower than in China? Yeah, but then that will be just exporting. They are physically going there with their investment. Why do you think that they will be going to other parts of the world with their investment? To get investment. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, somebody here. Vladimir has to say something. Vladimir always has to say something. This is your next mayor of Tumen, by the way.
As we discussed in lectures, China invest in other countries. They invest to infrastructure because it's like investment for future. After that, other countries, other states become dependent of China and of Chinese investments.
What did we say about raw materials?
So exactly, we said that Chinese were interested in raw materials because they take it and it's like recycling.
They produce something, they bring it back, and they increase the production and all of that. Very true. Anybody else would like to think why we go globally? Yes.
Maybe you spread your influence in the world when your company became international.
To reduce expenses.
We want to go where, for example, we talk about raw materials. We want to go where raw materials are, so it's cheaper. We also want to go what that gentleman was saying, where labor costs are lower. So we can do that by expanding globally. Or for that matter, maybe we start operations somewhere else, make that a regional center, and then actually expand our export from that regional sector, center. Japan, after the Second World War, sometime in the 60s and 70s, started to export cars to the United States. And you will probably never believe this story now, but at the time, Japanese cars were really low quality. But Japan knew that United States is really big market for cars. So basically what they started exporting to the United States, improving the quality of their cars, So much so that sometimes in the 70s, mid-70s, they were exporting so much then that United States government imposed quota. And the term is voluntarily export quota. They imposed those quotas by limiting the number of Japanese vehicles that can enter United States market. How did Japan react to that? What do you think? Do we have Japanese cars today in United States? Yes, no, maybe? Exactly. That's the whole point. That's how Japan reacted to that policy. Instead of exporting directly from Japan, what they have done, they started their own facilities in Japan. So now they're avoiding any trade tariffs, any trade voluntary, involuntarily quota, any quota for that matter. Now they're there. Now they're a local company employing local people, paying local taxes, and they're still able to expand. And for that matter, the way how Japan functions, not only did they expand by creating factories that are making cars, they also brought other suppliers from Japan. So they expanding their market and then definitely made more money. Okay. Now, let's see this video. Hopefully, it's going to work. And how do I do that? You click on the first one. I hope the first one and the last one should work. I put so many links just to be sure that at least one will work. It should work. I tested. Can you just click on it? Yes. Maybe enlarge it.
This mini-lecture provides a high-level overview of international strategy. In particular, it gives guidance on how managers can answer 3 critical questions when thinking about going global. First, why should I expand internationally? Second, where should I expand? And third, how do I expand? What fundamental strategies do firms use? By international strategy, we mean more than 3/4 of all sales across national borders. Today, more than 3/4 of all sales revenue in the US comes from multinational corporations, either US firms that compete abroad or foreign firms selling in the United States. In other words, most successful firms end up expanding internationally. Obviously, there must be benefits from international expansion if so many firms do it. But why should you expand internationally? Pause me and list at least 3 reasons why you think companies decide to expand internationally. If you listed to increase sales, you would be right. This is the first and most straightforward objective. But what if you increased sales but didn't make any profit on those sales? Would you still want to do it? Research has shown that when companies expand to foreign markets, it is less profitable than their home market. This has sometimes been referred to as a liability of foreignness. Think about it. You think you would be as effective running a business in Mexico or China as you would in the United States? Probably not. In fact, smart companies expand internationally to achieve important strategic objectives that help them deliver unique value to their customers. Beyond increasing sales, these objectives include cutting costs, managing risk, and learning new things. The second objective is to cut costs. Paradoxically, some firms expand in order to cut their costs, even though operating in foreign markets increases transportation and communication costs. For instance, some firms expand overseas to tap into cheap sources of critical resources, such as moving production to China to access cheaper labor. Firms also look to cut their costs by selling in foreign markets. By selling more units than you could in your home market, you can tap into economies of scale. For example, you can spread your research and development costs across more units, thereby lowering your cost per unit. The third objective is to better manage financial and operational risks, and firms with lower risk also have lower costs. While the economies of the world's countries have become intertwined, there is still wide variation in how well countries do at any given time. Firms that have customers in more than one country can better weather economic storms. This helps keep the company's revenues and earnings more stable, which lowers the costs of raising capital from banks and investors. This also becomes critical if a country undergoes severe economic hardships like the 1994 currency devaluation in Mexico. Many Mexican cement manufacturers went out of business in those years. At the same time, however, Cemex, a Mexican-based multinational cement manufacturer, became the worldwide cement leader, offsetting its losses in the Mexican market with sales in other countries. It isn't just economic storms that firms can better manage by expanding overseas, however, but operational ones as well. Having operations in more than one country allows firms to continue production even if labor goes on strike in one country, or if a natural or man-made disaster disrupts production like the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactor meltdown in Japan. The fourth objective is to learn new things that can help companies differentiate their products. Customers in different countries often want different things, which can lead to discovering different product features. For instance, GE's healthcare division developed in China an inexpensive portable ultrasound machine to service the rural Chinese market, where they couldn't afford GE's large, expensive ones. Turns out that there is a market for an inexpensive portable ultrasound machine in Europe and the US, and GE is now selling this product in all of its markets. Being close to different types of customers helps firms innovate faster and makes it more likely that they will be at the forefront of the next big thing in their industry. Knowing why firms go global, however, is only part of the battle. You also need to know where to go. Imagine that you lead a company in the United States and are responsible for deciding which 3 countries to enter first. What types of countries would you choose? What criteria would you use to make that choice? Pause me and write down your answer. The easiest answer to this question is to enter the country with the largest number of potential customers for your product. Countries like China and India. However, wise leaders also think about how likely they are to succeed in a particular foreign market. After all, foreign means different, and different can be difficult to deal with. One way to think about differences is to measure the distance between countries. But not just geographic distance, cultural, administrative, and economic distance as well. The smaller the distance between your country and the target country, the greater the likelihood of succeeding. In other words, it often makes sense to enter the countries that are closest on all 4 types of distance. First, geographic distance. It literally means how many miles separate 2 countries. Companies are more likely to succeed in nearby countries because physical proximity lowers both transportation and communication costs. That's why most US companies expand first to Canada and Mexico. Second, cultural distance refers to language and cultural differences, meaning differences in the way people live and think about the world. Most US companies expand to Canada before Mexico because Canadians speak English, and there are fewer cultural differences. When cultures are similar, customers are more likely to want the same things. When entering a new country, you should ask, are your customers going to want the same things? Or will you have to modify the product? Are they going to want them delivered in the same way? For some industries like cement or semiconductor chips, there aren't large variations from country to country. But for food, clothing, and even washers and dryers, the differences can be large indeed. Third, administrative distance is all about differences in regulations, government policies, and legal systems. Countries can vary widely on these dimensions, and if a firm doesn't understand how to meet regulations and deal with a different type of legal system, it can fail, even if it has the best products in the market. China's government and regulations are so different from those in the United States that many US companies refuse to enter, even though it will soon become the world's largest market. Fourth, an important factor in economic distance is the average purchasing power of customers in different countries and how elastic that power is, meaning how much demand for a product changes as price goes up or down. This is a big deal for a lot of companies from industrialized nations who are used to selling products in markets where everyone is wealthy by worldwide standards. Nearly 2/3 of the world's population, however, lives on less than $2 a day. 75% of India's over 1 billion population still doesn't even have a refrigerator. Naturally, economic differences like these have a major influence on what types of products will be demanded. The bottom line is that entering countries with fewer geographic, cultural, administrative, and economic differences will dramatically increase your chances of success. Finally, once you have an idea for why and where you are expanding internationally, you can think about how to expand. What fundamental strategies can you use? The 3 fundamental types of international strategies are multi-domestic, global, and arbitrage. First, a multi-domestic strategy treats each country or region as a different market with different customer needs and different ways of doing business. As a result, it requires adapting products and business operations to each country that a firm enters. For example, home appliance companies like GE and Samsung design and sell different types of refrigerators in different regions in different parts of the world. In Asia, the refrigerators are smaller than in the US, but instead of 2 doors, they often have 3 to 4 doors to lower energy costs. In Korea, Samsung even designs a refrigerator with a special kimchi drawer, designed to seal in the powerful aroma that comes from the strong-smelling cabbage that Koreans eat daily. Companies choosing a multi-domestic strategy do so because they think that differentiation is a key to the unique value they want to offer in each country. The downside to this approach is that it is costly because you need to design and manufacture a different product in each different country or region. Thus, you need to make sure that customers are willing to pay for your differentiated offering. Second, a global strategy treats the world as a single market where customers in different countries basically want similar things. For example, Boeing pursues a global strategy as it sells standardized planes around the globe. It does not tailor its planes to different markets. Everyone buys the same plane. Firms that employ this strategy try to standardize their products, marketing, and operations across countries, no matter how different those countries are. This means fewer production facilities and centralized control over every aspect of the business in order to maximize economies of scale. Of course, the downside to this strategy is that not all customers worldwide want the same thing. The greater the geographic, cultural, administrative, and economic distance between countries, the greater the likelihood that customers are going to want something different. In these cases, some companies try to localize some aspects of the business. For example, McDonald's changes its menu depending on the country, selling teriyaki burgers and green tea sundaes in Japan, and Parmesan cheese McNuggets in Italy. The third type of international strategy, arbitrage, involves exploiting differences in the cost or quality of resources between countries. For example, IBM found it could hire software programmers and call center employees far cheaper in India than in the US. So it expanded to India to access those resources. Hyundai expanded its car design operations to California in the United States to access creative auto designers that were not available in Korea. Similarly, Philips set up R&D centers in Japan to take advantage of the large number of high-quality electronics engineers produced each year. Other times, it means using cultural arbitrage, where you sell products from one country to another because of the cachet that comes from that country's name on the label, like French wine, German engineering, or American fast food. Indeed, in China, American fast food companies like Kentucky Fried Chicken are considered upscale dining, partly because of the positive high-end reputation of US firms. Getting global strategy right can be very difficult. It requires matching the right reason for going global with the right places and the right strategy for your company. And you must do this while managing significant differences between countries and responding to intense rivalry from both global and local competitors. However, while the challenges are great, companies that get it right win in a really big way.
You can switch now to the presentation. Thank Thank you. Yeah, music is good. Nobody's going to sleep now. Okay, one thing from each group, this one, and that one, that you got from this presentation. We'll start with the guest who makes money while he's here.
Excuse me, can you catch me? I think it's today we have trade wars because in the video we have India, China, but today it's like a conflict between USA and China, and I think the global strategies of companies is changing because there is a global economy is decrease, and we have some new reality, and what it will be in future we don't know, but I think it's like many interesting things in video.
What do you think? Who is benefiting from this trade war between US and China? I mean, there are many, but what do you think? The first country that comes to your mind that may be benefiting?
I think China. I think we have Russia have a chance to involve in world economy with some products.
Thank you, thank you. And our next guest, what did you get from this video that was interesting for you?
I think some things are much more complicated than in this video. Yeah. I think some companies anyway has some strategies. For example, there are some automotive cars which low in price, but their parts, the price of their parts are much higher. But anyway, they wouldn't change their strategy from country to country. They're more suitable for some exact markets in some country. Yeah. Probably that was.
Okay, let's go here. And you have to say something. Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
So my first now. And smart. Well, it's interesting that the company can benefit from this cultural difference and can actually lose. Like I like this example from Japan where this KFC and McDonald's being considered something like a high-class restaurant, while in Russia and USA it's lower-class fast food. And it's interesting. I don't think that actually the company itself thought about this result when they were invading the Japanese market with their products. So.
It was in Japanese too. Japanese too. Again, since you said that McDonald's fast food is not luxury market, I know that you are all here very, very young, and you probably don't remember, or maybe you didn't learn, when did McDonald's enter this part of the world? I'm not mentioning country. When did it enter? What do you think? In the 90s. Okay. And believe it or not, at that time, the president of the United States was Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton at that time really, really liked fast food. And he really liked McDonald's, and he really liked Coca-Cola and all of that. So what do you think? He actually went with the president of Yeltsin, and they met in McDonald's. But at that time, McDonald's was actually regarded as a very high-end restaurant in let's say this part of the world, and the prices were much, much higher. And this is an example how the positioning of one product, one institution, one foreign company can change over time. When it entered the market, it was actually high-end product. And as you said now, it's like also fast food and cheaper. Is it cheaper really?
Depends, I guess, but yeah, it is.
And then I need somebody from here who is not Dennis to volunteer. And Dennis will volunteer, like, I think you are smiling nicely, so let's start with you. Let's try. Okay, you don't want to try? Okay, anybody else? Dennis, you are the one. I mean, I guess you have to rescue your part of the world.
So could you repeat the question again? Not interesting, but rather very useful how you have to think of different steps in developing like an economy in different countries, and how, I don't know, how dangerous it may even be, because like so many, I don't know, like, yeah, probably.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I was just asking what time do we have, because I have so much to prepare, and let's see how much we are going to be able to cover. Now, this is an important one. When this video was going on, mostly in the video you were able to hear the words company and maybe country. Who else are part of these stakeholders? Who are do you know the term stakeholders? The term stakeholder stands for like somebody who has some interest, stakes in the whole process. So we definitely know that the corporations have interest. I mean, they can win, they can lose. Who else? Country have. Both countries, importing, exporting, or where the foreign direct investments are going, they can also have interest. But who else is a stakeholder in this international global business? Who else is involved in this process? Who else can benefit and be heard? Dennis, again. But those are offshores, are already countries and companies. Is that what you're thinking? Companies abroad? Yeah. I was thinking more than just companies. Yeah. Sure. Private investors. Okay. Who else?
Yes. Same country, we imply governments of the countries.
Governments. Okay. Who else?
Maybe like people.
People, exactly. Not but maybe, but very much so. People at many different levels. People who are working, people who are buying. You were talking. Where is my person that doesn't like globalization because of loss of the culture? Okay, that one, because people can feel that they're losing their culture. Who else is going? Sorry, clients. Okay, customers. Okay, clients. Who else is impacted with everything that those companies are doing? But those are companies. It doesn't matter if they're local or not local. Companies are companies. Who? Lobbyists. Those are also companies, kind of people. People. You put them somewhere. What else is really, really affected by? Not only by globalization, but basically by production. Sorry? Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So very good. No. What did I do? Okay. Wrong company. Because nature is in, I want to show this video, the story of stuff. If you can click on that one. No, not that. The story of stuff. After you see this video, you may not really sleep well, but you're definitely going to think a lot about this course and the things that you're hopefully going to see in this video. Okay.
of these, I got a little obsessed with mine. In fact, I got a little obsessed with all my stuff. Have you ever wondered where all the stuff we buy comes from and where it goes when we throw it out? I couldn't stop wondering about that, so I looked it up. And what the textbook said is that stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. Well, I looked into it a little bit more. In fact, I spent 10 years traveling the world, tracking where our stuff comes from and where it goes. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine. No problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely. Every step along the way, this system is interacting with the real world. In real life, it's not happening on a blank white page. It's interacting with societies, cultures, economies, the environment. And all along the way, it's bumping up against limits. Limits we don't see here because the diagram is incomplete. So let's go back through. Let's fill in some of the blanks and see what's missing. Well, one of the most important things that's missing is people. Yes, people. People live and work all along this system. And some people in this system matter a little more than others. Some have a little more say. Who are they? Well, let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military. But I'm using a person to symbolize the government because I hold true to the vision and values the government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. It's the government's job to watch out for us, to take care of us. That's their job. Then along came the corporation. Now, the reason the corporation looks bigger than the government is that the corporation is bigger than the government. Of the 100 largest economies on Earth now, 51 are corporations. And as the corporation has grown in size and power, we've seen a little change in the government where they're a little more concerned in making sure everything's working out for those guys than for us. Okay, so let's see what else is missing from this picture. We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals. So here we are running up against our first limit. We are running out of resources. We are using too much stuff. Now, I know this can be hard to hear, but it's the truth, so we've got to deal with it. In the past 3 decades alone, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource base has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute. And what about the people who live here? Well, according to these guys, they don't own these resources, even if they've been living there for generations. They don't own the means of production, and they're not buying a lot of stuff. And in this system, if you don't own or buy a lot of stuff, you don't have value. So next, the materials move to production. And what happens there is we use energy to mix toxic chemicals in with the natural resources to make toxic contaminated products. There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day. So we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals, but we do know one thing. Toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, we're going to keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants, they're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk. That means that we've reached a point where the smallest members of our societies, our babies, are getting the highest lifetime dose of toxic chemicals from breastfeeding from their mothers. Is that not an incredible violation? Breastfeeding must be the most fundamental human act of nurturing. It should be sacred and safe. Now, breastfeeding is still best, and mothers should definitely keep breastfeeding, but we should protect it. They should protect it. I thought they were looking out for us. And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted. Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the US, our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas, pollute someone else's land. But surprise, a lot of that pollution is coming right back at us, carried by wind currents. So what happens after all these natural resources are turned into products? Well, it moves here for distribution. Now, distribution means selling all the toxic contaminated junk as quickly as possible. The goal here is to keep the prices down, keep the people buying, and keep the inventory moving. How do they keep the prices down? Well, they don't pay the store workers very much, and they skimp on health insurance every time they can. It's all about externalizing the costs. What that means is that the real costs of making stuff aren't captured in the price. In other words, we aren't paying for the stuff we buy. I was thinking about this the other day. I was walking to work and I wanted to listen to the news, so I popped into a Radio Shack to buy a radio. I found this cute little green radio for $4.99. I was standing there in line to buy this thing, and I was thinking, how could $4.99 possibly capture the cost of making this radio and getting it into my hands? The metal was probably mined in South Africa. The petroleum was probably drilled in Iraq. The plastics were probably produced in China. And maybe the whole thing was assembled by some 15-year-old in a maquiladora in Mexico. $4.99 wouldn't even pay the rent for the shelf space it occupied until I came along, let alone part of the staff guy's salary who helped me pick it out, or the multiple ocean cruises and truck rides pieces of this radio went on. That's how I realized I didn't pay for the radio. So who did pay? Well, these people paid with the loss of their natural resource space. These people paid with the loss of their clean air, with increasing asthma and cancer rates. Kids in the Congo paid with their future. 30% of the kids in part of the Congo have dropped out of school to mine coltan, a metal we need for our cheap and disposable electronics. These people even paid by having to cover their own health insurance. All along this system, people pitched in so I could get this radio for $4.99. And none of these contributions are recorded in any accounts book. That's what I mean by the company owners externalize the true costs of production. And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop, to shop. We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers. The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume. And do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months. Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput? It wasn't always like this. The average U.S. person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued. So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It was designed. Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebeau articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods. More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically? Well, 2 of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one. It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues, even everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole thing and buy a new one. So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional. But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing. Like, I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk. Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that arrow as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more likely in some ad. It's to keep us buying new shoes. Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the U.S. is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have? So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong, we are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping. Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision. So in the US, we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted. So we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck. So you got to go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you got to go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought. So you come home and you're more tired, so you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to the mall again. And we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop. So in the end, what happens to all the stuff we buy anyway? At this rate of consumption, it can't fit into our houses, even though the average house size has doubled in this country since the 1970s. It all goes out in the garbage. And that brings us to disposal. This is the part of the materials economy we all know the most because we have to haul the junk out to the curb ourselves. Each of us in the United States makes 4.5 pounds of garbage a day. That's twice what we each made 30 years ago. All of this garbage either gets dumped in a landfill, which is just a big hole in the ground, or if you're really unlucky, first it's burned in an incinerator and then dumped in the landfill. Either way, they both pollute the air, land, water, and don't forget, change the climate. Incineration is really bad. Remember those toxics back in the production stage? Well, burning the garbage releases the toxics up into the air. Even worse, it makes new super toxics, like dioxin. Dioxin is the most toxic man-made substance known to science, and incinerators are the #1 source of dioxin. That means that we could stop the #1 source of the most toxic man-made substance known just by stopping burning the trash. We could stop it today. Now, some companies don't want to deal with building landfills and incinerators here, so they just export the disposal too. What about recycling? Does recycling help? Yes, recycling helps. Recycling reduces the garbage at this end, and it reduces the pressure to mine and harvest new stuff at this end. Yes, 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 we should all recycle, but recycling is not enough. Recycling will never be enough for a couple reasons. First, the waste coming out of our houses is just the tip of the iceberg. For every 1 garbage can of waste you put out on the curb, 70 garbage cans of waste were made upstream just to make the junk in that 1 garbage can you put out on the curb. So even if we could recycle 100% of the waste coming out of our households, it doesn't get to the core of the problems. Also, much of the garbage can't be recycled, either because it contains too many toxics or it's designed not to be recyclable in the first place. Like those juice packs, where they have layers of metal and paper and plastic all smushed together, you can never separate those for true recycling. So you see, it is a system in crisis. All along the way, we're bumping up against limits. From changing climate to declining happiness, it's just not working. But the good thing about such an all-pervasive problem is there are so many points of intervention. There are people working here on saving forests, here on clean production, labor rights, fair trade, conscious consuming, blocking landfills and incinerators, and very importantly, taking back our government, so that it really is by the people, for the people. All of this work is critically important. But things really start moving when we see the connections, when we see the big picture. When people all along this system get united, we can reclaim and transform this whole linear system into something new, a system that doesn't waste resources or people. You see, what we really need to chuck is that old school throwaway mindset. There's a new school of thinking about this stuff, and it's based on sustainability and equity. Things like green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, local living economies. It's already started. Some say it's unrealistic, too idealistic that it can't happen. I say the ones who are unrealistic are those who think that we can continue with the old way. They're dreaming. Remember, that old way didn't just happen. It wasn't like gravity that we just have to live with. People created it, and we're people too. So let's create something new. There's a lot of information on this website about groups doing incredible work. Click around, get involved.
Okay, this video was actually portraying United States, but do you think that it is only unique for United States, or you think that you can find examples in some other countries as well? Maybe Andrew will answer that question. Yeah, I mean, do we have similar situation in other parts of the world?
Well, I don't know. Europe now has more forests than 100 years ago. So apparently it's not as bad.
Maybe some other parts, like maybe pollution, maybe is it happening in some other parts of the world? Maybe this consumption society, is it happening in some other parts? Yes.
As you know, China is not very responsible for resources overall. For example, I know the case with water resources. They build these agricultural structures, and the consequences are not so good. For other countries, swampy lands are created, and productions in that countries suffer, and there are a lot of factories.
Thank you. What do you think about her proposal that maybe one of the big mistakes and maybe something that we need to change is actually the way we view the world? She started with this linear system, that every part of the system was actually in a certain way isolated. People don't see the big picture, as we will say. And then she ended with this actually circular system, that now you see that everybody is connected. What do you think about that suggestion? Yes.
Actually, I don't believe that something can be changed, because human. No, I'll explain. I think it's human nature. We think anthropocentric. Anyway, we can't think like the environment. And from the other point of view, why does it matter what we are dying because of? Is it natural environmental conditions, or it's a factory which is a part of our environment now? Why does it matter? We think nobody cares about phytoplankton, for example, because people do not love it. They do not love it like trees, some rare cats, leopards, or something. So people are anyway anthropocentric, and that's why nobody cares actually about production weights, which are 98% of all weights. They care about home weights, which are only 2%, because they're anyway anthropocentric.
Hoping for some more optimism here, but it seems like kind of very, very. It's a point of view. No, I agree. Thank you for that point of view. No, it's good. It's always good to hear different points of view.
Yeah, regarding previous point on like, does it matter what are we dying from? Well, it does matter, because we can just stop dying. Yeah, it's kind of naive, but still there is a way. So why not to try?
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Well, actually, I think for nowadays the situation is changing because a lot of people are paying attention to all of these problems and they talk about these problems. And previously, yeah, uh, there comes to my mind the situation with BP in the Mexican Gulf. There was a huge problem with the oil, and actually, it hurt the company. And for nowadays, a lot of company try to be more respectful to nature, and they even uh, make sales on that they respect the nature. They make something to reduce pollution and to to recycle their products, their expenses, and other stuff. So it's changing.
Very much for that example because I live in Florida and we were very much affected by that BP oil spill, and it was really for some of you who are maybe going to have a marketing or maybe you're going to think about public relations, it was really such a bad public relation for the company because initially when that happened, and it did happen in the Gulf of Mexico, so three or four different states were affected by that, and a number of people who actually depend on anything that is coming from the sea, including tourism, including fishery, and all sorts of things. But what the CEO of the company, BP, did when that happened, he actually did nothing. He went on his private yacht and he was celebrating his 50th birthday. And needless to say that he was very much soon out of the business because the company really was, the image of the company was hurt. I don't want to say as much as the oil spill by his behavior, but definitely that wasn't a very good behavior. And ever since then, BP, all their advertisements and public relations and to say what you're saying, like everybody is now paying much more to those green products and sustainable products and all of that. They're really putting a lot of money to promote themselves as environmentally friendly company. But you want to say something?
Actually, why it's dangerous not to be aware of the whole situation and to say like it doesn't matter from what we will die and stuff is that people used to think very often about finding another planet which is good enough to live there, but if they don't fix the situation on this planet, they just ruin another one as well. So first of all, just fix here everything and then try to search any other life, I would say.
So much. And by the way, actually talking about this stuff and the garbage and waste, I just today read that they came up with packaging that is eatable after we consume it. So there are ways how we can reduce the waste.
Yeah, I was just thinking that there are kind of two lines of reasoning in this video, right? One line of reasoning is that we cannot go on for a long time because we will run out of something. Resources, space, land, air, something like that. Whether or not it's true is a question, right? The second line of reasoning is that quality of life of people is getting worse. So there is this argument about happiness of life in the United States. But I think if we try to propose to this lady to go back and live in 1950s in the States, would she agree? If we propose people in China, which is now industrialized with destroyed environment, to go back to pre-industrial era, will they be happy? Do you think people lived better before industrialization, when it was an untapped nature, but people would be dying of at the age of 30 on average, etc., etc. So I think there are of hunger or whatever. So so I think the video actually mixes up all these two lines of reasonings. But if we actually look at each of them separately, we can actually question whether or not they are true.
Always very good, and I think that video I choose this one in particular because it's the one that is going to start the debate, and that is one that is usually going to have opposing views. And I think that is really, really important in general terms to have opposing views at least to hear opposing views, because each of those views are going to then make us think harder and deeper to actually look for the arguments in favor of our point in order to be sure that is this really the good point or is it not the good point, or maybe we will change our behavior one way or another. Okay, what time do we have? Since we only have 7 minutes left, I just want to do some announcements. We are going to meet tomorrow with all of you who are actually taking this as a course, and we are going to meet at 11 o'clock. And then I'm going actually to talk to you, just this group that is really taking this for a credit. I'm going to talk to you about the course and assignments and how was I envisioning this course to work out. But before we actually say good night, laka noci, for tonight, I will actually like to hear from, let's say, 10 people. What did you get? Where were you the most surprised? Where were you least surprised? Did you learn something? So I'm going to start with those ladies that are in film department, and the film ladies are going to tell me something about what did they get.
So I enjoy these examples in the film because we can see and understand more correctly information, and enjoy how you tell us information, because we have a connection with the audience. And
Okay, I really like the first video about where extend, who extend, and how extend, because I think that can give us some special basic ideas of how international business works in general. And I really like the idea about debate about globalization that can hurts like sometimes, but in my opinion, for example, globalization gives us really good opportunity to create international companies, to create new markets, and to provide some special goods for other country which doesn't have this or something like that. And also this multicultural atmosphere creates more made positive future.
Somebody from here? Anybody? Would you like to say something?
Oh, well, I personally knew some new stuff about why companies become global and go to the other countries and become international. So I knew some little reasons about why they do this, and now I knew more.
Something?
Yeah, also about the first video. I knew some details of international politics of the companies, various companies, but have never thought about them in these three categories, like multi-domestic and so on. And it's like curious to see it in this way.
You have mentioned that you like the first video and how it was talking about international business. What do you think, McDonald's, and you mentioned McDonald's. McDonald's in Tumen. Who owns McDonald's in Tumen? That restaurant. And who owns that one that is franchise? Where is he coming from? That was my question. That would be my question. He is a Russian citizen, and the reason I'm asking that because very often when sometimes actually in France there were like a lot of maybe like now even 10, 15 years ago, there were demonstrations by French farmers against McDonald's. And they actually destroyed McDonald's restaurants, but thinking that they're going to do harm to United States or America, but actually the owner of those restaurants were the French people. So I think that the knowledge of international business will probably tell us a little bit more about the ownership, about what is what, who is who, and that's why I think that this course will be really, really interesting for you. And I'm waiting for all of you to see you next Tuesday. And for the guys who are in this class, see you tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Okay, thank you. Спасибо большое.